So I have been reading all of my life. No matter what crazy, thick, technical book I've been reading, I can always kind of step back into young readers. Most of these books, if I didn't read them in middle school, I read them at the end of elementary school. So for me, the term young readers kind of encapsulates books that are meant for people from 8 to 12, depending on reading levels. So I can always step back into those books, which is really, really comforting. When I read these books, I find that not only can I step back into sort of the way that I was as a child when I was reading those books initially, but they're kind of therapeutic to read as an adult because you look back on the things that were so impressionable on you as a child and you realize that you've learned lessons from these books that are so important, and reading them as an adult, they kind of remind you of those lessons, and it can be really humbling. And it can kind of give you a nostalgia, and not one of those sad nostalgias that you get in your chest, but a kind that is exciting and really puts you in the shoes of being a kid again. So these are some of the many books that make me feel like a kid again when I pick them up, and I do often. First up is The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster with illustrations by Jules Pfeiffer, published in 1961. So this is a fantastic adventure that follows Milo, a very bored, unmotivated kid who finds little joy in anything. He's gifted a mysterious kid-sized toll booth and a working car, and when he gives it a shot, he finds himself in the amazing, fantastic world of the Kingdom of Wisdom. In the Kingdom of Wisdom, there are tons of cities and landmarks that are all kind of based in academics, and I think as a kid, you don't really think of it that way, but as an adult, you totally do. He finds two companions for his trip along the way. One is Tick-Tock, who is a dog that is also a clock, and Humbug, who's just a general grumpy flying bug. And soon they find themselves on a quest to find the princesses Rhyme and Reason. And Rhyme and Reason are the balancing factor of the kingdom. Along the way, they stop in all of these amazingly clever cities, one of which is Dictionopolis, where there is a market that is a word market, and it's kind of like a farmer's market, but you can try out and taste letters, conjunctions, and all of these literary written things that have taste to them, which is really, really fun and cool. And people are there in this crowded market buying up these words in Dictionopolis. Lots of things happen there, but there's a lot to unpack in terms of the world of the Kingdom of Wisdom, so I won't go into too much detail, but there's also a man who conducts a symphony, and that symphony creates the environment. So it creates the sunrise, it creates the sunset, it dictates weather and the colors that we see, which is really, 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 really fun. And it also includes a man who collects discordant sounds, which is really cool. He collects all these nasty sounds. And there's so many other amazing things to this book. But the point is, we need rhyme and reason. And of course, there are bad things in this kingdom, as there are, and we need them to sort of restore the balance to the kingdom. And the bad things that are present are all kind of relative to the 7 deadly sins, I would say. A lot of them are reflective of laziness. And so we meet a few characters and we are in a few places that are sort of reflective of laziness and how it's not productive to be lazy, and you find yourself wasting a lot of time being lazy. So the entire time, Milo, as he's going through this land and having these experiences, he's finding that the things that are fun in life are the things that you have to learn. And those things include math and science and shapes and colors, and the only color in life comes from all of these things, and the darkness in life comes from things like laziness and time wasting. Yeah, this is a book that I've read cover to cover at least 7 or 8 times, I would say. This is not my original copy. None of the books that I have here today are my original copy. They're all in another state. Although I wasn't the kid who didn't enjoy academics, I definitely was a kid who was lazy, I would say. Not as lazy as others, but I found myself not wanting to do my schoolwork, and I found myself bored even though I had all this stuff around me to do. And I think the Phantom Tollbooth is something that my brain always kind of goes back to whenever I'm confronted with those problems. Like, I'm not really bored. I have plenty of stuff to do. I just need to get out of that toxic mindset of laziness. And so this book is really, really, really impactful for kids in that young reader's age group who might struggle with being uninterested in the things around them. And when I worked at Barnes & Noble, this was something I gave to many, many, many parents and grandparents to give to their kids who didn't really enjoy reading or were really, really smart, but found themselves really unmotivated at school. The next book I'd like to talk about is Harriet the Spy, written and illustrated by Louise Fitzhugh. Oh, Harriet. So this book details about a year in the life of Harriet M. Welsh, and yes, she goes by Harriet M. Welsh, and no, her middle name does not exist. She just puts an M there to sound fancy. She is a kid who's armed with a flashlight, a notebook, and a pen, ready to spy at any moment when the need arises. Harriet uses her work as a world-class spy to make interesting observations about the people and situations around her. The problem is she's blunt to a fault and finds that when her notebook gets into the wrong hands, she's hurt a lot of people in her life that are important to her. And the problem she has is that she doesn't quite understand that the observations she's making are true, but they aren't kind. And they aren't understanding. There isn't a, this is why this person does this. It's, this is what's happening. And people oftentimes don't want to look at things in that way. They know why something is happening. And that's what they think about the situation. For instance, if she says that a friend always has ratty clothes on, she's not saying that, oh, her parents are probably in a little bit of financial misfortune and can afford new clothes. What she says is she always wears dirty, ratty clothes. So things like that. I don't remember if that's a specific thing that she writes in her notebook. We get a lot of those snippets, but it's things like that that really land her in trouble. And our amazing, intelligent Harriet finds that through the course of this book, being a spy isn't all eating tomato sandwiches and asking for advice from her nanny, but we love her nanny. It's about humility and kindness too. Harriet the Spy was a book that my mom loved as a kid, and I remember her recommending it to me at the library when I was probably 8 or 9. After I read it the first time, I checked it out 3 or 4 times in the next few years. I absolutely loved this book, and I did love the old Nickelodeon movie, even though it seems like nobody else did, which is rude. I think I related a lot to Harriet because I was an only child until I was 7, and by the time my little brother was born, when I was 7, it took him quite a few more years to get to a point where he and I could be playful with each other. So I was kind of an only child till I was like 11 or 12, but because I spent a lot of time by myself, I too found myself spying and taking observations, even though I didn't quite have a notebook for it because I was a little more secretive as a kid. I definitely had a lot of the same problems that Harriet did with making statements that were strictly observational and didn't really include a why, and they weren't understanding observations. They weren't intuitive observations. They were judgments. At least that's what it seemed to the other people. As much as I tried to reason in my head that I wasn't being unkind, I was being unkind without knowing it. So I really relate to Harriet in that way. And I had to learn the hard way, just like she did quite a few times, that making a judgment is not the same as being intuitive to a problem. I learned a lot from Harriet the Spy, and every time I read it, I really, really enjoy it more and more. This is absolutely one of my favorite kid books of all time. The next book is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which was collected by Alvin Schwartz and illustrated by Stephen Gamble. This is going to be a short one. Obviously, this is a collection of scary stories, terrifying illustrations. I probably picked this book up in, I think, like 6th grade and had it along. I think I had the second one as well. I've always loved scary things. My parents didn't really hide scary things from me, which I'm thankful for now. But I remember picking this up and it was super scary, and it still is kind of really creepy and gives me chills, and I read an okay amount of horror. We in this house love horror movies, so the fact that something that can provoke those feelings to an adult was given and marketed to children, I loved. I feel like there was a lack of censorship, maybe, when I was younger that we kind of have now in terms of scaring your children, but I loved being scared by this book, and a lot of these illustrations pop up in my head on like a weekly basis. The next book is Coraline, written by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Dave McKean. Coraline Jones and her family have just moved into a really large house that's been divided into apartments. As Coraline begins to explore this new environment, she finds it full of this fantastic cast of characters. We have a guy who wants to start a circus of mice, a mouse circus. We have a duo of these old former actresses who are really theatrical in life, and a black cat. Of course, I have to mention a cat, among others. So as Coraline observes her boring mom and dad, who are stressed and broken, boring, and don't give her any attention, she finds that her life is just not satisfactorily fun. And she can't have everything that she wants, and she can't do everything that she wants. And as an only child, that's a theme in my life, I guess, she has to go do things on her own, which is boring. But she does so. So she eventually finds this tiny locked door, and then of course she tracks down the key, and of course she goes through the door and finds herself in a mirrored world of her own, which is the other world. The circus of mice comes to life in this other world, and the duo of actresses puts on this massive theatrical work, and everything is just sort of tweaked a little bit differently otherwise in this giant house and property that she lives on. And another weird thing is that she finds is that everyone there has buttons for eyes, which I always thought was really cool. The most strange thing of all, though, is that Coraline's mother, her other mother, and her other father are completely and utterly infatuated with her and give her everything that she wants and all the attention that she can get. Essentially, that other world is exactly what she thinks she wants. The problem is Coraline feels this darkness among that world, and at some point she finds these ghost children whose souls have been trapped in that world by the other mother, and the other mother becomes known as the Bedlam. So long story short, Coraline goes to the real world, finds her parents are trapped in the other world, and has to go to the other world, defeat the Bedlam, come back to the real world, and enjoy the rest of her life, her normal boring life. This book was special to me because, as I said, I was an only child, much like Coraline, and I, too, often felt really unsatisfied with my life. My parents didn't have a ton of money, and I couldn't get everything I wanted, and I couldn't do everything I wanted, which is pretty common for kids. I don't know why so many of us feel like that's such a thing. But what I learned, just like Coraline, is that you have to learn to be happy with what you have, and that family is completely irreplaceable. No matter the situation, family is completely irreplaceable. As an adult, I now also understand the parents' position. They just moved, they're broke, they're relying on the dad to work really hard to write this book, which he's stressed out about. The mom's stressed out about it. And of course, Coraline, who is at an age where she needs to start being more independent, of course she's feeling like she's not getting the attention. So I also, as an adult, value reading that because I see a whole other perspective now. The last young reader's book I'd like to talk about is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. Stargirl is the new girl in town. And yes, that's her name for now because she believes that names can be changed just like sweaters. Leo falls head over heels for this new weirdo in town who wears the wackiest clothes, tracks birthdays to give anonymous gifts, which is really cute, and she's kind to every single person she interacts with. We watch as Leo tries to help the school warm up to Stargirl. Obviously, she isn't popular right away because she's different, but things are going really good for them when Stargirl gets on the cheerleading team. Obviously, stereotypically, this boosts her popularity right up, skyrockets, and she's at the very top. And her popularity completely crashes down to the ground. And she takes Leo with her on this. So now Leo's at a point where she doesn't care. Stargirl doesn't care that she's lost her popularity, but Leo does. And then he has to decide what's more important to him, his popularity or his girlfriend Stargirl. He decides to try to balance out the two by asking Stargirl to be normal. So Stargirl disappears and she becomes Susan. Susan is boring, Susan is normal, and she doesn't really have a light around her anymore. So one day, boring Susan comes back to school as our beloved Stargirl, and this annoys Leo because he's trying to be popular, you guys. It was working for him. And she has sort of accepted at this point Leo's never going to love her for who she is, and she's just going to continue being who she is because that's where she's comfortable. And she tells Leo, look, you don't have to invite me to the latest school dance. I'm just going to go by myself. And she does that. She becomes the absolute light and life of the party and leads everyone on a bunny hop train. And the next day, pretty much, she's gone. Leo can't find her. She's left town. And we know at the end of this book that she has made an impression on everyone at this high school. Stargirl for me is about embracing myself for who I am. I struggled for a very long time and continue to do so, I think, with my identity and showing who I really am and figuring out what that actually means. She helps me understand that being weird or different is better than being popular in general. It means you're doing your own thing. Being popular isn't nearly as important as being true to yourself and taking care of yourself the way you need to be taken care of. Another theme that people pull from it is that you can't change other people, and it's probably not worth it to do so. You either love the person they are, or you move on and let someone else love them for who they are. We all know a Stargirl, or have known a Stargirl, and passed judgments on her, and we all look back knowing that those are the people we should have respected and put our time and effort into respecting, because those are the people who knew early on that doing things that you love and being the person that you love is the most important thing and most valuable thing you can do for yourself as you grow up. There are quite a few more, but I think those are the ones that have made the most impact on me. I highly recommend that you go back and you read the books that you loved as a child and relive them, because as an adult, it can be very, very valuable and therapeutic. And I think it's a lot more fun sometimes than reading adult material. If you want to have a conversation with me about what we just talked about, you can comment down below. You can hit me up on my Instagram or my Twitter, or you can message me on my Goodreads, which is linked down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later on this week.